Hey everyone! Welcome to episode 10 of my Stretch Your Stamps scrapbooking video series. This month, I'm joined by my friends Ty Cortez, who is Moments to Memories here on YouTube, and Moments to Memories by Ty on Instagram, and Marie Hurst, who is Pear Tree Paper Crafts, both here on YouTube and on Instagram, as well as Adam Westwood, who is Scrappy Adam, both here on YouTube and on Instagram, and we're going to be sharing our favorite ways to use our tags, labels, and frames stamps. Before I dive into this month's video, here is a quick recap of last month's episode, which was all about stamp and ink storage systems. Michelle Lundy, who was one of my guest contributors last month, shared her stamp and ink organization, and I especially loved her unique way of categorizing her stamps and marking them with star stickers to flag some of the special characteristics about some of her stamp sets. She also shared a video showing how she categorizes her stamps digitally, so make sure to check that out as well. Chelsea Voris-Morty, who was another one of my guest contributors last month, shared her stamp and ink organization as well, and my favorite part of her video was when she shared how she organizes her distress ink blending foams in these divided containers. I thought that was so cool and so well organized. Linda Jordan was my last guest contributor, and she shared how she categorizes all her different types of stamps from different stamp sets into different categories in her stamp binders. And I just found it so fascinating that she has each stamp from her collection categorized in these binders. For my video contribution last month, I shared how I like to organize my various types of ink pads, stamps, ink swatches, and other commonly used stamp-related items like embossing powders and ink blocks. So make sure to check out all of those videos in my Stretch Your Stamps scrapbooking playlist if you missed any last month. Moving on to some inspiration from Instagram, I love this post that Tiffany Mitchell, aka Blue Pixie 79, made on Instagram. She shared this font index that she made for her alphabet and numbers stamps, and I just think it looks so cool when she has them all stamped out like this. This is definitely something that I've been meaning to try doing, but just haven't gotten around to doing it. And Tiffany's also shared a few posts this month as well, and I just love this spread that she created using the Strong Story stamp from Ellie Edwards. The way that she used the Strong Sentiment stamp to emphasize that word throughout her type journaling was just so eye-catching and creative. This next post on Instagram is from me. I've recently started a series on YouTube and over on my Instagram called Ink Pairings, where I go through Ali Edwards' Story Kit and Stories by the Month kit every month and pick out some inks that coordinate with the colors in those kits. So if you're an Ali Edwards subscriber, make sure to check those out as well. Just a reminder that if you'd like to share some layouts on Instagram inspired by our Stretch Your Stamps videos, make sure to use the hashtag #SYSScrapbooking on Instagram, and I'll pick out a few to feature in my video next month. For this month's theme, I decided to group tag stamps, frame stamps, and label stamps all together because they're all kind of like stamps with a blank space that you could fill out. And in my video today, I'm going to be sharing a cool idea for using your frame stamps to create interactive photo flaps, how to use your label stamps to create a fun journaling page, and a quick hack to stamp and cut out lots of these label stamps all at the same time. For my first layout, I'm using this framed stamp set from Studio Calico and Goldenwood Co., and I'm going to be doing some white heat embossing on some colored cardstock. And because I'm going to be stamping 7 of these out in total, I'm going to use my stamp positioning tool. This one is from Holtz, and that's just to make sure that I get a clean impression each time I stamp. Before I stamp my images down, I'm using my anti-static powder tool to make sure I don't have any like greasy fingerprints on the surface of my cardstock that might attract any stray embossing powders. And I'm going to ink this stamp up with my Versamark ink pad, which is a clear ink that's kind of sticky, so when I sprinkle embossing powder onto my cardstock, the embossing powder should only stick to the areas where I've stamped with the Versamark ink. In this video, I'm using 2 types of colored cardstock just to get the colors that I wanted. I am using a linen textured one from Bazzill for the first 3 colors, that's the red, the orange, and the yellow. And I'm using a smooth cardstock from Michael's as well for the rest of the colors in this lineup here. And I'll have to say that linen textured one from Bazzill does cling onto stray embossing powders a lot more than the Michael's one does, even as I'm using the smooth side of that textured cardstock. So you'll see that I'm just using a small dry paintbrush here to brush away some of the excess embossing powders that are sticking in between the lines of my stamped images, and that works well enough for me. But if you are looking to get more into heat embossing and your embossing just isn't as clear as you'd like it to be, I would recommend to look at your cardstock and make sure that you're using a smooth cardstock, and that should make a bit of a difference as well. Next, I'm going to start heating up my embossing powder, and I've always found that the best way to prevent my paper from warping too much as I'm heating it up is to make sure that my heat gun is nice and hot before I bring it close to my project, and I do like to heat up the back side first, then heat up the front side. And with embossing powders, you want to make sure to only heat it up until the powder is all melted and looks nice and shiny, because if you overheat it, the powder can actually start to absorb into the paper and become dull and not as shiny. So I'm just going to repeat those same steps with the rest of my colored pieces of cardstock. I just chose 7 colors in rainbow order that were fun and vibrant. I had recently placed a huge order with Studio Calico recently during one of their most recent sales, and I picked up a bunch of their color theory packages. So those colors were definitely in my mind when I was picking out the colors for this spread. And you'll notice with my heat embossing for these final 4 panels that the impression does seem to be a lot more clear, and I'm having to clean up a bit less with my dry paintbrush. And I just attribute that to these being smooth cardstocks as opposed to the first 3 that I used were textured. Once I'm done all of my heat embossing, I'm going to trim out these frames with my paper trimmer, leaving a bit more than ½ an inch of blank space above the top of my frames to create a little hinge so that I can attach those down onto my base page in kind of like a messy waterfall, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. So I'm just taking each of these frames after I've finished cutting them, and I'm scoring at that ½ inch mark at the top. Then I'm going to fold on those score marks, and I'm just playing around with each of these to see how they're going to lie on my page. And after that, I've gone off screen to print out 7 small photos measuring approximately 1½ inches wide by 1 7/8 inches tall. That's just small enough to fit inside each of these frames. And after I've adhered each of these photos into place, I'm going to attach some 3/8 inch score tape onto the hinges on the tops of my photo frames, and then use that to attach my photo frames onto my base page, starting from the bottom and working my way up. For the right side of my layout, I've enlarged one of the 4x6 digital journaling cards from Studio Calico's Fairy Tale collection, and I've typed up some journaling just on those colored blocks. And I'm going to be stamping my title onto this piece of vellum that I'm going to staple to the top of my journaling page so that it forms kind of like a flip up. And I'm using the Lucy alphabet stamp set from Studio Calico and Kylie Bennett, and I just love the way this font looks on top of that rainbow journaling card in the background. I did make sure to stamp the word of in a different font. This is using Ali Edwards and Laura Wanzik's catchphrases stamp set. Just because I wanted to be able to fit more letters onto that line, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to fit both the O and the F if I used that same Studio Calico font. Because I'm stamping on vellum, I did make sure to use my jet black archival ink so that it doesn't smear once it's dried. I did leave some space on the right side here just to add some of the vellum stars that I got from Studio Calico, and those I stapled onto the vellum page because I didn't want to have any adhesive showing through the back of that vellum. just stapling the top of my journaling page and the vellum page together to create a flip up. And off screen, I did also add one of the red vellum stars to the top right corner of my left page, just to fill up that empty space there and add another pop of color. And here are some photos of my finished layout. I just love the way the white embossing really stands out on my brightly colored pieces of cardstock, and it just makes the page pop a bit more. For my second layout, I'm going to be using this labels stamp set from LE Studio to create some journaling spots on my page. And I also wanted to share this quick hack that I shared a while ago on my YouTube channel when I first started making scrapbooking videos. This stamp set does come with a coordinating die set that is sold separately that will cut out each one of these labels. And I've snipped off the two smaller ones that are nestled in the centers of two of the larger label dies, but I kept the rest of them intact, and you'll see why in a moment. With this large grouping of dies that are attached together, I've die cut a guide using some plain white cardstock. You don't have to do any stamping beforehand, just run a piece of blank cardstock through your die cutting machine with this group of dies. Next, I'm going to place this guide into the bottom left corner of my stamp positioning tool and line up each of the coordinating stamps inside each of these empty spots in my guide. And it takes a while to get all of these positioned into place and centered within each of these empty spots. But once I close my lid down with my stamp positioning tool, I can pick up all of these stamps onto the lid, and I can take a few pieces of white cardstock in the same dimensions as my guide. These just happen to be 5 inches wide by 5 inches tall, and as long as I line them up and position the pieces of white cardstock in the bottom left corner of my stamp positioning tool, I can stamp all of these stamps down in the same place each time, and they should line up perfectly with this set of dies that are grouped together. Now, if you've gone ahead and you've snipped these dies apart already, you can just kind of piece them back together by using some washi tape to hold them all into place, and that should work just fine as well. The ink cubes that I'm using here are all from Altenew, and since I'm going to be working on that striped background that I've printed off from an enlarged journaling card from Ali Edwards' May Stories by the Month kit, I'm going to be using some of the coordinating inks that I picked out in my ink pairings video, and I'm just using the 5 colors that match the 5 stripes in that journaling card. Once I'm done all of my stamping, I'm going to line up my grouping of dies with all of my stamped images and run them through my cutting machine one at a time, and not long after, I'm back with 5 sets of 8 stamped labels. So that's 40 labels in total. And this trick really saved me the time of having to stamp out all of my stamps individually and then having to fussy cut them all out by hand. I've cut my pattern paper into one 5-inch wide piece and one 2-inch wide piece. And the 5-inch wide piece is going to be the base of the right page of my layout, and I'm going to use that smaller piece as the border of the left page of my layout. So here I'm just rearranging some of those labels onto my page and adhering them down into place. I just want to make sure that they're kind of staggered and that the colors mostly match the color of the stripe that's beneath it. And once that's done, I'm just going to trim off the overhanging edges of some of these labels here. I just like having the overhanging edges because it makes the pattern look a bit more organic. Next, I'm going to do a bit of stamping on my layout with some stamps from Ali Edwards. So this currently stamp is from the Basic Prompts stamp set, and the ING words are from the Day in the Life half circle phrases stamp set from this year's Day in the Life release. And after that, I'm just going off camera for a bit to fill in all of these labels with some highlights from the month of April. Next, I have this piece of pattern paper with the colorful plus signs from Ali Edwards' Write Story Kit. And I'm going to tuck that in diagonally behind the striped paper as an additional layer behind my photo of the month. And just adding a few embellishments after that. There's a wood veneer banner month from Colorcast Designs and a couple of chipboard embellishments from the Stories by the Month kit to finish off my spread. And here are a few photos of my finished pages. I hope you enjoyed those tips and tricks for using frame and label stamps in your scrapbooking projects. I would love to see what you create with these types of stamps as well, so don't forget to use the hashtag #SYSScrapbooking if you decide to try out any of the techniques in this video or any of the techniques shown in Ty, Marie, or Adam's videos. I'll be sharing new episodes for my Stretch Your Stamps scrapbooking video series on the second Saturday of each month, so make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel for more crafting inspiration. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below, and make sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching!